Back to the civic reception now for the TAC. Rollo has more to bring us. Then we cross to a presentation by Father Kevin Dillon.
Phil Reid, how are you, Phil?
I'm good, thanks, Graham. Thanks for having me here.
Now, your position at the TAC down in here in Geelong is a very important one, community relations.
Yeah, look, that's right, Graham. We have an important role with the TAC, and that's to make sure that all those Victorians who pay their premiums, to make sure that on the off chance that they have a road accident, can be appropriately looked after. We need to make sure Victorians understand a bit about the scheme, but more importantly, we want people to understand that at the end of the day, we don't want them having anything to do with the TAC. We'd like to think that we can make the roads safer and that they never have to rely on the TAC for claiming because they've been in a road accident or suffered any sort of road trauma.
It is a most difficult area. From a personal viewpoint, I was involved in a major car accident back in 1965 and paying mentally penalty now, but the TAC has been a very proactive element of our community in relation to dealing with particular the road toll and car accidents, etc.
Well, Graham, if you were involved in an accident back in 1965, that would have been in the days before a scheme like the TAC existed. Over those years, between 1965 and 1987, governments of both political persuasions realised that some people were left horrifically maimed after a car accident and they needed support. And we take our role in doing that very seriously. But of course, the best thing we can do for people is to try and make sure they never get into that situation. And that's why we have such a strong focus on driving the road toll down, making sure that people are safe drivers when they're behind the wheel of a car, that they don't drink and drive, that they don't speed, that they take regular rest breaks if they're going on long drives. And we've also seen over the last few years a contribution into making safer roads. And many people will see those roadside improvements that the TAC is making around to try and make sure that if people do have an accident, their chances of surviving that in a healthier way than they might have 30 or 40 years ago is greatly improved.
I'll say personally, I think one of the most significant steps that's been taken forward is that we're starting through the TAC, particularly through the world of television, to get the impact of accidents and what the victims have to potentially go through. The message may be getting across through that more stronger reactive message.
Graham, we've really used, I suppose, an emotional approach to advertising, and we've done some pretty hard-hitting stuff, some pretty graphic ads in our time, and as we saw last year, using real families, people who'd experienced real trauma. And the thing we find is that those people who've experienced road trauma, particularly road trauma at its worst, a death or a serious injury, they tell us to go as hard as we possibly can because nothing we can show on TV will ever equate to the real damage that can be done from road trauma when it impacts a family and impacts a community.
How are you enjoying working in our great city of Geelong?
Oh, look, I've got to tell people I was a Melbourne supporter, football, and I had terrible memories of coming down to Geelong, usually to watch us getting flogged at Cardinia Park and getting chased back to the train station. And it was quite a revelation to come back here years later and start walking around the waterfront and see how beautiful the city really has become. And again, the respect we've got not only as individuals coming to move to Geelong, but as a business, the level of support we've got to help us with the transition has just been fantastic. And I'm very happy here in Geelong. Still a Melbourne supporter, but I am looking at the East Geelong Eagles, who are just down the road from my place here in Geelong. So I have got some sporting affiliation here in Geelong.
Mr Neville Whitley, OAM, who was the president of the Geelong and District Football League and a life member of the East Geelong Football Club, will love you for that.
I'm very glad to be here, Graham.
And it's interesting, the East Geelong Eagles play on a Richmond Crescent, so there's a bit of an enigma there.
Yeah, and there's that.
Yeah.
That's right. There's I note the team, as I say, are only playing down the end of my street, and there's a lovely little Irish pub about halfway home, so I am looking forward to the footy season.
A man who is really enjoying the TAC and their relocation to our great city of Geelong, Mr Phil Reid. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for being part of Geelong and its future.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Channel 31.
With you again on Good Morning Geelong. A couple of weeks ago, I had a problem with my car. The rear passenger window got stuck, and the motor seized up so that I couldn't close the window, and had to get to a panel beater who was very helpful and got it fixed up eventually. Just disabled the motor because I don't wind it down very often anyhow, some of the things that go wrong with motorised windows. But it was a nuisance for a couple of days. I had to be very careful of where I drove the car, where I could leave it because it was unsecured and so on. I suppose for about, it was the best part of 48 hours or so that I had to be very careful of whether I'd use it or where I'd leave it or whatever. And I thought of that just the other day where there was a news report. I'm not quite sure why it made the news, but some young fellow that was doing 140 in a 70 zone, and they absolutely threw the book at him. He lost his car for 48 hours. Now, about the same length of time that my broken back window motor had inconvenienced me. And I suppose that there are always laws which we wonder why they apply, why they're applied in the way that they are, and this one is one that just baffles me completely, in the sense that 48 hours off the road for an offence double the speed limit. I mean, most people, I suppose, have probably gone a few kilometres per hour over it, but 140 is not inadvertence. It's not we didn't see the sign. 140 is purely calculated, deliberate violation of a law to double the degree of what it should be. If you want to get some sort of an idea of what 140 is, well, you try it one day. It's a long time since I've driven at that sort of rate, but that's really virtually 100 miles an hour in the old scale. And with the impounding legislation, he's off the road for 2 days, for goodness sake. 2 days is nothing. And I just really wonder at how genuine we are. We've got all of the regulations and the speed limits, and people are booked at 2 and 3 kilometres per hour over the limit. This fellow's doing double the limit in a 70 zone, 140, and he loses his car for 48 hours. The idea of impounding cars is basically a good one, but if there's ever some area that needs to be addressed, it's the slap on the wrist situation where a law is broken coldly, calculatedly and deliberately without any regard to the safety of the driver, passengers, let alone anybody else who happens to be on the road. Reality is that road fatalities and road injuries affect a lot more people than just the individual person that's involved. Even, for example, not just the medical teams, the ambulance people and so on, not even just the grieving families, and I've had to deal with many of those over the years, but even the police and emergency officers who come upon the scene, and often in some situations having to risk their lives themselves in order to get people out of burning wrecks and heaven knows what else. So there's the whole question of road safety is one which this is in some areas needs to be looked at a lot more seriously. It's not a matter of booking someone for doing 63 in a 60 zone or 73 in a 70 zone, but where people have clearly and calculatedly just thumbed their nose at the laws that protect all of us when we're out on the road, somehow or other taking a car off the road for 48 hours, certainly to me, and I would think perhaps to many of us, doesn't really seem to be doing the job. The Hearn legislation has got a lot to recommend it in different ways, but some of these slap-on-the-wrist penalties need to be addressed pretty soon because, well, it's the safety of you and me and people we care about and all of us within the community that's very much at stake. Hopefully a few people might have a look and say maybe turn 48 hours into 48 days or even 48 weeks. Then we might see a bit of a change in attitude. Good to be with you on Good Morning Geelong.
Thanks to Rollo for the interviews and also to Father Kevin Dillon. We'll be back after this short break with sport.